You do realise you're only here because we couldn't get Robbie Head?
Yeah, that's it. I know. I accept that. Robbie's always been a hero of mine.
Are you sitting here with your Speedos on now?
I'm sitting with my shorts and t-shirt on, yeah.
Right, Alister, Scotland's got this dreadful drug problem. Alcohol, suicide, bad diet, dreadful climate. So why did you move to Australia?
It was really difficult.
I'll bet you it was.
No, I mean, I my wife's from here. She's from Australia, so we get married and had kids in Scotland. But I always promised that at some point I would bring her back to thaw her out a bit. So she lasted seven winters in Scotland. Then we had to get going.
Absolutely, get out of here. Tell me, what do you miss most? Family and friends, or square sausage?
Square sausage. Square sausage is inside Loch Lomond after a night out in Duck Bay Marina, ready to go jet skiing in -5. You can't beat it.
Better talk about some rallying, eh?
Yeah.
So, see when you were small, Alister, were you following your dad around the country and stuff when he was kicking Russell Brooks's backside? And
I know.
Or were you doing the scrambling?
Mainly the Scottish rally. That was we would get to go down to the RAC now and again, but it was mainly the Scottish. You get involved in that was there. If you ever get a chance to go and jump in a car with him, if he was testing up for Scotland or whatever, then you would convince. It's easy enough to convince my dad to get a day off school, but it was harder with mum. So it was just a case of convincing him you want to go along, and you were always round about it. If not, you were watching it in Sunday grandstand.
So that was the days, eh?
Yeah.
What happened with the scrambling? Were you always going to go towards the cars, or was it just? And you were quite successful, weren't you?
I know. I enjoy. I was at a motocross track this morning before work, so I still ride. But I like that. For me, bikes are always. I guess bikes were the first love, but then cars, because you're around Dad and then Colin rallying, I was always going to have a go at it. But I did start. I went into adult motocross or scrambles when I was 17. But after my second knee operation, I decided that maybe it was a time to give that up and try the rally cars. But continued on. I still ride bikes all the time. I used to use it even when we were doing the WRC stuff. You use motocross to keep fit. You know, it was actually enjoyable. I'm not one for training inside or running in treadmills. I'll go out mountain bike, or ideally the motocross bike was the best for me, the best workout you could get, and great fun.
You're possibly the only Scotsman I've ever known that works out and stuff and keeps fit.
I know you've got to do that. You don't leave your house here unless you are.
Aye. So you got the Nova. How good were those years? You were quite a while in the Nova. Was it 4 years?
3. Did 2 years with the 1300, and then moved on to the 16. That was when Vauxhall did their GSI challenge. So the first 2 years with the Nova was the Scottish Championship, and then the second year we did some British round as well. At that time, Vauxhall did a bonus scheme, so I think in the Scottish Championship it was like 250 quid for a win in your class, and then another 500 for a win in Group A. So that we could always fight for the class win, and we fought for Group A wins overall as well. So that kind of helped the budget quite a bit the first few years in Scotland, and then they announced their GSI challenge, which was the new 1600 GSI Nova that came out. So we moved on to that in the third year, and that it was okay, but they had a lot of problems with the car. So we had quite a few retirements, mechanical retirements with the car, which weren't great. So that wasn't the best year, the third year in that. But for sure, the Nova was a great car to learn in, and motorsport never cheap, but that was one of the most affordable ways to start, especially with the bonus schemes.
Why do you think manufacturers don't offer these schemes up anymore? I mean, It's obviously a
They're
great
still actually, so
introductory package.
they've announced one, and just I sort of read it the other day. They're doing Renault are doing a Philip Bogalski challenge in France for all the basically two-wheel drive, Clios, Maxis, all that stuff. There's some dotted about, but it's just in the UK. I just don't think there's I wouldn't say there's not the interest, but the manufacturers are not putting their money into motorsport around that way, because it doesn't have a large enough following to justify spending the money, because it's about they spend money, they want a return on their investment, and if they're not getting that, then they won't do it anymore.
What's your thoughts on these electric or hybrid cars, and have you had a shot at one yet?
No, I haven't, and I don't know if I'm that keen on it, just purely for the noise. I watched some footage down in New Zealand. They were testing, Hayden Padden was testing his a Hyundai Kona, the electric car he's done.
I've seen that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It looks, to me, it looked almost sped up. It looks that quick, but it's just not the same with no noise. So it's like anything, it's coming. There's no doubt it's coming, but it'll be interesting. But I still like the best sound ever is a BDA coming through the forest in Scotland. So you're not going to get that again.
So you moved on to the Shell Scholarship. That must have really lifted your career, eh? I mean, did you win the BRC Group N?
Yeah, that was my kind of big breakthrough then, because at the end of the year with the GSI Challenge, to go to the next level was going to be expensive, and then obviously Shell had the scholarship, which we managed to win, and that allowed it to then go to the British Championship. Plus, not just that, you were then in a professional team. And doing events outside the British Championship for testing. You were involved with Shell and the promotional stuff as well. So I wasn't paid at that time. I was still working at the steelworks, but it was the first kind of involvement in a professional team, which obviously then let me kind of springboard on from there.
Who were you up against for the scholarship?
It was Robbie Head, of course.
Oh, great. Did you beat Robbie?
Robbie, my hero. Don Buckley, who else? Oh, Johnny Milner. Who else was there? Mark Higgins.
Was Joe Gray there, no? Joe Gray?
No, Joe never made it. No, he was busy. He was fixing somebody's plumbing. Who else? There were 6 of us. Ashley
Blinkhorn?
No. Actually, I'm not sure. I would need to dig out a photograph and see who it was. But
who obviously, was the judging panel?
Buckley, Robbie, myself, Richard Burns. Richard Burns was there. Johnny Milner, and there must have been one more.
Who was the judging panel? Do you remember?
It was a mixture of. There was some Shell. There was 2 people from Shell. Dave Thomas. He was the head man of motorsport in Shell. The woman that worked under him. Then there was, I think, David Evans from Motor News. David Williams was there. Kevin Ferber was there, because at the time he'd done it, but he was kind of work driver with Peugeot. He was involved. There was quite a few people there, and they basically got put through all different. It wasn't just the driving; it was the interview. It was fitness level. Everything was involved in it.
So you went on to try the Legacy in '93. Quite disappointing. Your overall performance, would you say?
It wasn't the best. It definitely wasn't the best year. I stuck it off in a couple of rallies, which wasn't great. And we had at the end of the day, I think in the Manx rally, we still had a chance of fighting for the championship, and we clipped the wall and took the wheel. Didn't damage the car badly, but it broke the steering. So it wasn't the best. Moving from the Group N car to the Group A car, obviously, at that age, you were really excited about looking forward to it. But it wasn't the year we wanted result-wise.
Was that your first pay check, was it? The Legacy?
It would be, yeah. Left the steelworks then.
Oh, right. And then it was the Nissan. On to Nissan, wasn't it, I think?
Nissan was a good couple of years. The first year Nissen was new to F2 was new to the British Championship, and Nissen was new to that. So it was a bit, the first year was a fair bit of development going with the car, with quite a few retirements, mechanical retirements, but the speed was always there. But then in the second year, 95, that was obviously, it all kind of came together, and won the British Championship, and got some events, started to get more events outside of the UK then, and some World Championship stuff. So it was all great to do the British Championship then, because it was, you know, there was 5-6 manufacturers, all with works to everybody, you know, it was a full professional championship at the front. There was 10, 12 cars. And then to get the chance to go and then get the experience in WRC rounds, then that was a really, really good 2 years there.
For me, that was the best BRC for me. I mean, I remember Vatanen and Blomqvist, all these guys in the four-wheel drives, but just the competition in the F2 cars was fantastic. And it wasn't boring. Uphill hairpins, they weren't boring.
Yeah, I know. I think these cars then, on the downhill stuff, fast flowing and downhill stuff, especially downhill, they were every bit as quick because they were a lot lighter. They were only, I think the weight limit then was 920 kilos, and they had 200 and with a kit car engine, you were up to 250 horsepower, maybe a bit more later on. So the power to weight ratio, they were good, and they basically on downhill stuff, I don't think there was really anything that would have been much quicker than them. Uphill hairpins, not so great, but downhill was good.
And, did you win the Scottish in that? No, it was the Welsh. Was it the Rally Wales on the Nissen?
I won the first one. Won Wales. We were second to the Mervis in the Carlisle Pirelli Rally. And I think in Scotland we were leading, and we had an electrical problem, which dropped us back in the championship. But then we went on to win in Ulster, and then the Manx, we basically to finish top 3 in the Manx, I think it was, to win it, and we managed that. So, and then at the end of that year, we then moved up. Well, we hired a car off Malcolm for what was then the RAC or Rally GB.
Yeah. Did you feel it was a bit of a come down going from the Legacy down to the Nissen?
No, because the championship was so strong. You know, that for me, and it's the same anytime. Okay, you want to drive the quickest car or the latest car, but it's the competition. If you're fighting for seconds with half a dozen people or a dozen people, it's way better than, you know, being in the four-wheel drive car Legacy. And there's only, at that point, there was only really myself, Richard and Malcolm. I mean, we were quicker than everybody else. So it was only 3 of us, and generally one of you had a bit of a problem. So it was 2 people. Whereas in the F2, when they came out, as I said, there was probably a genuine 6 to 8 people could win a rally, and then there were others that weren't that far away. So it made it really exciting for us as drivers and for people watching.
Volkswagen, how did they compare to Nissan?
By that time they'd gone on to the kit car regs, so they were more powerful. The first few events I did in '96 with it, they were having problems with the gearbox, so we retired in 3 events, I think, with gearbox issues. Changed to the new gearbox the year after, and from then it was good. The only downside of the Volkswagen was it was a very good gravel car, but probably didn't have the ultimate horsepower of the Renaults, or even the Vauxhalls back then were, you know, 285 horsepower, whereas we get told we had 280, but it was more like 255, 260. So it was a great gravel car, and, you know, we could win in gravel and fight at the front in the gravel, but in the tarmac we struggled a little bit with it.
It was such a good concept and really close competition. Why did it end? Was it just spiraling out of control cash-wise?
I don't know. I mean, I think they obviously got to a point where some of the manufacturers, they'd spent their time in it and they were starting to pull out, and then the regs on WRC or the European Championship were changing. So the British Championship changes with that. I think it's with anything, it goes in cycles, whether that's WRC or British. You get a cycle where it's really strong and then it drops off a bit. and that's just down to the manufacturers and the money that's in the championship. So I think as that dropped off, it kind of spiraled downwards for a bit. And then, new cars come along, different concepts, and then it's never really got back to what it was then.
No,
but it has had some good years.
Did you get any foreign events, apart, WRC events with the Volkswagen, apart from
with
Volkswagen?
Volkswagen, I think we did. We must have done probably, I think the second year, the first year we maybe did about 4 or 5 WRC rounds, and the second year we did 8. So it was real, for me, that was not a full championship, but I was getting towards getting experience in quite a few events. We won quite a few events with Volkswagen in Formula 2 at the WRC, and that was we were a private team. The SBG Sport ran us in Britain, and we would run on limited budget out in the WRC stuff, and we would go to Portugal and we beat the Peugeot team. We fought all the Finnish guys, beat them in Finland. And won Australia with it. So we had real good. 1998 was a great year with that car.
What's your favourite round in the WRC? New Zealand, like everybody else seems to be.
If you get proper snow, then Sweden. If you haven't got proper snow, then Sweden is a shit rally because it's real difficult and really easy to make mistakes because you lose studs and there's no snowbanks and so on. But if you get real good snow, there's nothing like driving there. Finland's got to be a favourite just because of the speed. New Zealand because of the roads, and then I reckon Corsica's a great event. I love Corsica as a tarmac event. So there's different ones there. But if you had to get favourites, it would be Sweden, New Zealand, Finland, Corsica, and then Rally GB just because it's your home event.
What about Australia? Australia's
a good event, but I wouldn't put it as a favourite.
Really?
What is it about the snow, Alister, that you like in Sweden?
It's very. I mean, if you're full snow, it's not hard in the car because it's smooth, so it's not rough, and you carry more speed through the corners on the snow than you do on gravel. And if it's the good snow, then the conditions stay the same. So, and with the narrow studded tyre, the car floats around a bit, so the car's moving, and it's way more sideways, but it's way more sideways with speed. So
more controllable.
As an example, with in gravel, if you're coming up towards something in fifth, and it is a fifth gear corner, then you stay in fifth in the gravel, or if you're in sixth, you're changing down to fifth. On the snow, you can actually take up a gear, but just going real sideways, and that generates the grip to get through the corner, but also it kind of fires you out the other side. So it's a real good feeling, good sensation.
98, you were lying second in REC. That must have been a hard one to take.
Lying second in REC and I'm lying upside down in a ditch.
Where did you roll?
Yeah, no, we
was that in Wales?
In Wales, yeah. I think it was the Margam stage. With the last, back then you obviously started in the morning in the dark, so the stage was in the dark, it was foggy, and we're having problems with the lights. They were cutting in and out the spotlights, so with I think we're probably only about maybe 5 miles for the end of the stage. I knew, and it was really quick, but every time the lights went in and out, it was difficult, so I decided that the best option was just turn them off, which in the fog, if you turn them off and just run blind, it's generally okay, but I got it a bit wrong, so we went down a ditch in 6th gear, and that was the end of that one.
1999, you signed for Hyundai, didn't you? That was
I
developed.
I did two events with a Hyundai in '98. I did Corsica and Cataluna, I think. Corsica and Cataluna with their original F2 car, which actually came from Australia. The coupe. And then '99 we did the Formula 2 Championship, and towards the end of the year started testing with the World Rally car.
How did the coupe compare to the Golf, etc.?
It wasn't. It was a good car, and it was obviously a full works outfit. real good car, but the engine wasn't strong on it. You know, that I would have said the Volkswagen was a quicker car, power-wise. The Hyundai did make up a little bit for it in the way it handled and so on, but it certainly wasn't any quicker than the Volkswagen had been the previous year.
So you helped develop the accent. How good a car was that? I think Mr. Forgan's got your old accent.
I do.
I see a picture in the background there.
Yeah, that's it up there. Yeah, I've got it sitting just outside my door there.
Yeah.
Right.
That was it was
What chassis number is that, Ian?
It was a terrible car. I don't know why anybody would buy one. No, I mean,
How good was it?
It was good, but we were at that point. You were coming into a championship that had very well established teams, you know, with big budgets that had been in for a long time. So it was a new team it didn't have anywhere near the budgets the other teams had. So it was a case of develop the car, probably on events more than on testing. The first year it was reliability they worked on and got the car and got the way when we scored its first points in the first year. I would say by the end of the second year, it was starting to get very, very close to the other cars. Just needed a bit more horsepower. But handling wise, transmission, the car was very, very good.
I was in one a couple of months ago, and I was just amazed. Just a test day at Creel on the tarmac.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. No, they're good. Very good car to drive. Great car to drive.
Were you disappointed with it in the end?
It's like if you look back on certain things, there's a bit of disappointment. At the time, you were not so much disappointing, but it was frustrating at times when you knew the capability was there in the car, but it wasn't. You'd maybe have the odd mechanical now and again, but to me that's pretty much motorsport. You know, there's the highs and lows come very close together. Disappointed, I wouldn't say disappointed. I enjoyed my time there. If anything, the disappointment would have been the fact that you didn't continue on in the WRC for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And did you?
How do you view your time? Sorry.
Sorry, Alister. Did you find the car was better on tar or on gravel? I
would say probably a little bit better on gravel, just purely because you don't need the maximum horsepower in gravel, or the lesser engine doesn't show up just quite as much on gravel. But on tarmac, I think that towards the end of the second year with it, it was starting to work really well on both. But on the tarmac, you do need to have the best engine out there to fight. So if anything, you just said, yeah, it's probably easier to go quicker on gravel than it is to go quicker against the top guys on tarmac.
Would that car have been up against the Peugeot Maxis and stuff at that point on tarmac?
That would have been, at that point, there was obviously just the Mitsubishi, the Focus, it would have been the 206 Peugeot.
206, sorry.
Citroen would just be coming in at that point as well with the Zara.
So you went to Mitsubishi. How was that? I mean, it wasn't the greatest of cars, was it?
No, I got to the correct team, but at the wrong time, I think. The Evo, they'd obviously continued to win. Whenever they went to World Rally Car, Mitsubishi stayed with the Group A car and basically continued to win with it. But by the time they realised the Group A car was starting to get long in the tooth, the other teams had 2 years developing the WRC regs. And when they went to WRC, they didn't do a new car. They just basically did upgrades to the Group A car. So it wasn't going to be as good a car as what they could produce. You know, it wasn't until they stopped the program, which wasn't great for me. Obviously, they stopped the program to then build a new car. I think if the team had stayed as it was when I was in it, with the management running under Andrew Cowan and these guys, if they'd stayed in, they would have built a car that would have come back and won again. But the management structure changed. There were new people come in and top, and it just kind of went downhill from there.
Who was your teammate? Was that Delecour your teammate, or did he get the seat the next season?
The mad Frenchman.
Was he a teammate?
He was teammate for the well, it should have been 2 years there.
How was he?
Ended up just one. What, sorry?
How was he? How was he to work with? Is he as psychotic as he looks?
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a bit of a loose cannon, but he's a good guy. Obviously very good on tarmac and Monte Carlo especially. But you know, just a decent guy. But the way he comes across has been a bit hot-headed and wild at times. That's what he's actually. He's genuinely like that, but he's nice with it.
What's the rivalry like in a top team? I mean, you've always got to try and beat your teammate, haven't you? But what about friendships? Have you had a few close friends that you've been teammates with?
No, you genuinely, I've not had anybody in a team that I've not been friends with. We've always been friends, but as you say, if you can't win, you need to beat your teammate. And that's basically the bottom line. But when you get to that point in a professional career, the people you're teammates with, if they've got there through the same hard work that you've got, they want to do the same thing. So you're never going to come into a team and, you know, annihilate your teammate. But if you do, maybe that teammate shouldn't be there. So, you know, you've got to that level where you are fighting against good guys, but you work together in a team to make the car better, especially like at Hyundai. Kenneth Ericsson and I work well together, trying to develop the car, because although we both wanted to beat each other equally, you wanted to make the car quick enough that you could fight with the other teams. So you work together on it, but in the stages, you know, it's obviously you want to beat him as much as you want to beat anybody else.
You managed the 5th place in Sweden with the Evo, is that right?
Yeah, that was the highlight of the year, I think.
Can I skip back to the Hyundai?
5th in Sweden, and then we actually had a couple of issues with that car mechanically wise as well. With some brake issues with, I think, in Cyprus, and then Monte Carlo, I went off backwards, and Turini, up in the top of Turini, I managed to get into the Amco barrier backwards and cause a bit of grief there. But it was we were at the start of the year, we were basically waiting for the Evo 2 or the second evolution of WRC was coming out, which was due to be, I think it came out in maybe Finland. We got that, but then we had brake problems there and lost a fair bit of time. So it wasn't the best. It wasn't what you wanted. We expected to go to Mitsubishi. They would have turned the car around, and you know, you'd hoped that you'd be fighting in the front, but it never really came about.
I'm going to skip back to the Hyundai. Did you not have a massive accident? One of your biggest, with Ian Grinrod beside you in the Hyundai.
Made Grinrod bleed.
Aye.
He did actually. It did actually. That was basically that in testing. I think at that point it was the only completed Evo 2 or the second evolution of the Accent, and we're testing in Portugal for the rally. I still to this day reckon, and Grinner's is the same, but that was maybe just because he's scared to not say. I'm for sure there was an electrical issue with the car, and it was just a really, really quick bit where you were on the power and you had to power through the corner, but there was just a moment where there was nothing there. It was basically almost like the engine stopped, and by the time it came back in, it was too late, and we were in the bank and rolled up the road. So, and then Grinner's did, as he got out, or we both get out, and I could see the blood running down his face, and I said, "Are you all right, Ian?" He says, "That's now fucking 3 of you that hurt me in the McRae family." Because Colin put him in hospital in Sweden, and my dad tried to put him in hospital in England. So that was he's only ever been injured in a rally car 3 times, and it was the 3 of us that did it to him. So
fantastic. So 2004, did you try and run get a private drive, didn't you? And you did a few WRC events, is that right?
Yeah, in 2003 we did a couple with Mitsubishi, and then other European stuff. And then 2004, by that time the WRC when Mitsubishi pulled out, the WRC was already in a bit of a downturn. You know, the cost of doing it, manufacturers were pulling out. Obviously, Mitsubishi did. Hyundai pulled out. Ford and Citroen, these guys dropped from having 3 works drivers to 2, so there was no seats anywhere. And then I got chatting to Neil Gatt, who had bought RED and was running. He'd run Mark Higgins quite a few times in the Subaru. So we started chatting to Neil, and Neil come up with, so why don't we try and get some money together and we'll do the production world championship, which is what we did.
How did you get on?
Really well until 3 stages from the end of the championship. The final was out in Australia, and there was 3. I think there was myself, Yanni Passanen, and I think Toshi Arai. The 3 of us were still in the fight for the championship, and basically whoever won the rally won the championship. Well, we basically led from the start and pulled out. I think we were about 2.5 minutes in the lead. And the 2 stages in the morning, the final day in Australia, at that time, they were very tricky and quite easy to get punctures. But then the final 3 stages down in Bunnings, where you could drive at 95% and you'd be pretty safe. So my thing was, if I could get out of the first 2 stages in the morning, then we've got it in the bag. And we did. We pulled out even more. We're almost 3 minutes in the lead when down to Bunnings, and the start line of the first stage down there, dropped the clutch, and the rear diff exploded. So that was it. We were on the car back home.
So were you still hopeful of another top drive? Because you're saying there was no. Is that why you did that yourself? To try and keep yourself in the picture.
You've got to try and keep yourself there and keep in the eyes of all the team. So that was the reason for doing that. At that time, it wasn't possible to raise the money to do like a WRC car, but Group N was a potential. So the reason that was the reason for doing it, to try and keep your name there. But as I say, the teams were reduced in numbers, and the drivers were reduced in numbers. So it'd probably gone, I think, 2001 with a Hyundai at that point, and I think it was in Australia that year. There was something like 21 works drivers there. 7 manufacturers with 3 cars, and it went from 21 professional drivers down to, like, I think it went to 10, straight away. So it's at that point there, you needed more manufacturers to come in to get the sport built back up again. And I don't think it has never got back to that level.
No. Oh. What about Proton? That was a while later, wasn't it? You signed for Proton, 2009, was it?
I did a little bit of testing for them in 2009, and then we did 10, 11, 12 in the Asian Pacific Championship, and 1 or 2 WRC rounds, but not so many. But that
was
time,
that 2011.
Sorry.
2011, you won the Asian Pacific. How did that compare to the BR? Sorry.
It was a different.
How did that compare to the BRC?
Different altogether. Difficult events, very diverse events. Whether it was your China, you had the good events like New Zealand, events in Australia, but then you also went to China and into Japan. So there was a big variety of types of event. There wasn't the number of drivers that you had in the British Championship. There was no. It was probably the championship was between 4 drivers. The worst Mitsubishi team, then the Proton team. So you didn't have a massive entry, and it was between basically the four works drivers for the championship. But still, good events and very diverse compared to the British Championship.
You were quite successful with Proton. Why did they pack it in?
I mean, Chris Mellors that run the team, built the car, run the team. He put a lot of his own time and effort and probably funds into getting them going and getting them interested. He'd worked with the Malaysians for a while, and they tend to these companies change. The management in these companies in these countries changes quite regularly. So there were new management come in, and then there was a buyout of part of the Proton company. and that the company that bought in just said they're cutting back on all basically marketing, anything to do with the rally program was just stopped. So it was back to that thing again. The management at the top have got to either like the sport or see a massive return on the investment they put in it, or they just pull the pin on it.
Let's see, what's China like for rallying? You did a
That's
season
it.
in China, didn't you?
Yeah, it's an interesting place. You wouldn't want to have a big accident there because you're not sure exactly whether you'd end up in the hospital or where you would end up. So I I enjoyed my time there. It's good. It's an experience, but the rallies are not. It's not as professionally run as other places in the world. The odd time you come across the three-wheeled bike coming the other way, or a family on a motorbike coming down the stage. So it's the safety side of it's definitely not what it is elsewhere, but it's still driving a rally car, and I mean that's what you enjoy. So driving the car and fighting for wins or whatever is it doesn't really matter where it is as long as everybody's doing the same thing.
How did you get on with the rallycross? Did you do a rallycross meeting 2017?
We did. It was basically one event. They'd hoped they would do a bit more, but it was one event down in France I did, which was a great experience. But you literally, if you don't get to the final, I think we get 2 practice runs and 3 heats, and they're not that long. So like mileage-wise, you probably did 25 kilometres over the weekend, and when you're used to doing whatever, well, back at the start, 450, 500 k's in a rally, 25 k's doesn't seem that much as seat time. If you were in a team that was fighting for the championship and you were doing the full championship, it would be great. But it's completely different to what we're used to in rallying.
How's the Australian rally scene? My friend's in New Zealand. He's got a rally magazine as well, and he was saying that there's quite low entries now in Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, Australia's because of the size of Australia. It's the West Australian Championship. Being in West Australia, you're fairly well. You're isolated from the rest of Australia, really. So and over here in a West Australian round, there might be, I don't know, 40 cars that do the West Australian Championship. Maybe slightly more, but so you would say 40 in an event. All gravel, all within a reasonable distance of Perth, and then the Australian Rally Championship itself. There's events in each state, but for us to trailer a car across to Queensland, it's 4 days, so it's not 4 hours down the road or anything. So the Australian Rally Championship itself, there's probably, I think this year at the moment, there's maybe about 17 or 18 registered that will do the championship. But then obviously, when it's in Queensland, you get all the local guys doing it. So you might have a big entry, but it's not a championship it's not like the British Championship where you could have 100 entries or whatever it was back in the day.
What about television and sponsorship? Do they buy into it at all?
No, and over here, unless it's V8s, like V8 supercars, then it's very, very difficult to get TV coverage. Or the V8 supercars is the equivalent to the Rangers and Celtic playing at Ibrox.
Right, okay. So what about, have you got any regrets in the sport? Has there ever been a contract you should have signed, never signed, whatever? What's your regret? Competitive-wise?
When I signed with Mitsubishi, I was talking to Citroen at the time, and Citroen were just kind of coming in. They were doing a park program, so there was the potential for maybe eight events the year after, whereas Mitsubishi was a full program. So, and with Mitsubishi at the time, I honestly thought they would sort the car out. Maybe not the first year there, but the second year, you'd have a good car and you'd have the chance to win. That didn't happen, and Citroen went on to dominate. So you would look at that and think maybe there's the opportunity there, but you can't. Ifs and buts don't really matter.
Done pretty well, I would say. Is there any of you guys got any questions for Alister?
You're doing fine, Bob. I'm getting molested.
He's asked plenty.
What plans, Alister, do you have for the future?
It'd be nice to be able to travel back to see the family in Scotland, but I don't see that's going to happen for a while. But for me, rallying wise, I'd like to go and do the odd rally now and again. I'd started to do a bit more, your Goodwood Festive Speed or Rally Day, or I've done a fair bit in the last few years down in New Zealand with the Subaru down there. That's up to nearly 900 horsepower. That's great fun. But for me now, it's more this thing. You get the chance to do something like that, you go enjoy it. But more now,
Is that hill climb? Is that hill climb stuff you're doing in that Subaru?
Yeah, basically down there to do the Leadfoot Festival and Ashley Hill climbing stuff. So, and I do the company that own the car. I do a bit of drive days and promotional stuff for them as well.
Over here, one of the challenges now is getting young people into the sport. We're competing with various things like computer games and stuff like that, and there's been a few virtual championships and events. How do you see the sport? Obviously, I don't know what it's like over there, but how do you find getting young people into sports proving to be a challenge? Obviously, Max is, you're doing things with him and bringing things on, but do you feel that's a challenge over there as over here? And how do you see maybe trying to combat getting people into the sport?
I think now, for me, when we talked about the Nova, when I started with the Nova, I mean, my first car, the Nova, I think we paid 1,500 quid for it, put the roll cage in it, did the engine ourselves in the garage. So, we built a car for maybe, 3.5, 4 grand, did a season's rallying in it, got bonus scheme, didn't pay for all the rallying, but it paid for a lot of it, and then sold the car for 5.5 or 6 grand. Now, for Max, it's basically you need to look at an R2 car from M Sport or from Peugeot, and it's a 50 or 60,000 euro car. So for a young guy to get in there and do that, it's just very, very expensive now. So the kind of club elements where you could come up through and start in lesser cars and build your way up, there's not really that option now, I don't think. You've got to basically be in with an M Sport Fiesta or whatever, and that's expensive. And probably more so now there is, whether it's wealthy families or a lot of people have got the money to do that, but generally the guys that have got the money maybe don't have the skill level. So I think for anybody that's your normal person, working person, to try and get their young one into rallying or into any kind of motorsports, it's not easy now, I don't think.
No.
Kind of spinning off from that, obviously Max has done a bit of circuit racing and things like that in the past. How do you see kind of the opportunities in rallying going forward compared to circuit racing? And also, how do you see the landscape of rallying changing in the next kind of 10 to 15 years as he goes out on his journey that you've kind of been through? Obviously you've got less manufacturers kind of involved now. How do we keep the relevance of kind of rallying up?
Yeah. I mean, what the difference between, I think the difference between racing and rallying, there'll be more opportunities to be semi-professional or professional in racing if you're good enough, because there's more opportunities around the world, whether it's in Asia, Europe, wherever. Rallying there's very, very limited positions there to go professional. So from a racing point of view, if you were looking at, you like racing as equally the way you like rallying, and you wanted to try and make a profession out of it, I would probably say try and do it in racing. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to go rallying. So you've got to try and work out how to do that. As far as where rallying's going, I think the manufacturers will start to get involved again with these new regulations with hybrid. Much as the purest rally person doesn't want that to happen, it'll take that change and new technology for the manufacturers to then look at it and say, right, we can now showcase the new technology in a sport that people can relate to. And I think that's how I reckon rallying over the next few years, rallying will get more manufacturers involved, and it'll start to get stronger again. Touch wood, hopefully.
What do you think of current rallying, Alister? The WRC setup and that, the length of the rallies, just the whole thing. What do you think of it?
mean, I'd rather go back to what rallying was when it was, 3 days and 500 kilometres or 4 days and 600 kilometres. But it's not the way the rallies have gone. They had already started to go down the shorter, more compact routes when I was doing it, and that's obviously got even more now. A lot of it's to do with the manufacturers having their big, massive marketing opportunities in the service area. So they can have it all centrally based. For me, that's not what rallying was back in the day, but that's what it is now. I think the cars themselves they're amazing to watch now. The speeds they carry, the way they work, it's tremendous to watch them and to see them. But I would prefer longer rallies where they go into the night safari, these kind of events. They've definitely become very much a sprint event.
I recently interviewed John Hogland at the rally school, and he was saying that the cars are far, far more easy to drive now. You don't need you don't cross your hat. Is that something you would concur with?
I would say, I've not driven the latest cars, but talking to people with them, I think to a certain extent, they may be easier than what they were in the old days, but to get that final second a kilometre out of them, I think that's not an easy job at all. I think there'll be a very fine line, because you're starting to use, they've got proper aerodynamics and their aero in the car. You actually need to carry enough speed to be committed enough to make the car work for you, and that's where you get the lesser drivers in the WRC cars are beaten by R5 cars now, and that's just because at a certain level there's not an awful lot of difference in it, but to get that last bit out of the car, you've got to be so committed with it, that there's probably less people can do it than what there used to be.
If I can take you back to the BRC, who was the one competitor you didn't want to be on the same time as the last stage? Who was that good? You're thinking, shit. Yeah, you were going for the win. Who was right up there for you?
I think there was quite back then. There was quite a few. It just depended on the rally. We had in the Scottish rally, we had a real big fight. There was lots of us involved, but then at the end of the day, it was down to myself and my teammate Tapio Laukkanen. Two of us had pulled away from everybody, and I think went into the last stage. We were only 2 seconds apart. We were 2 seconds ahead of them. We ended up, we were two after the full rally. We were 2 seconds ahead. We managed to take, I think it was about 9 seconds out of him on the last stage of the rally, which obviously pissed him off. But for us, it was great. So there was different people on different events. It just depended. But there was half a dozen of you that could win the rally, and on your day would be very hard to beat. So there wasn't one that you would say, I definitely don't want to go against him. For me, it was a case of you wanted to go against them all. That was the events like that where you got to the last stage of the rally and the 2 seconds apart. That's when you had to dig deeper than you had the whole rally, and you're already on the limit. So you knew you had to get an absolutely perfect stage, and you hoped that you could do that. And that's the big buzz about rallying. It can be so close, but then you can get that last bit. It can go the other way as well. You end up in the Manx rally with the legacy when we ended up in the wall. It can go both ways.
How do you get that last bit, Alister? Is it taking risks that you wouldn't ordinarily? If it was the third stage of the rally, you maybe wouldn't take a risk, but you get to the last stage and you think, I'm only 2 seconds in the lead here. I'm just going to have to go for it. How do you do it?
I don't actually know. You've just got to be, it's the belief in yourself that you can do it. And I wouldn't, it's not so much when you say taking risks, it's not sudden. If you've got a 6 right or a flat left in the notes, or an easy left, a 5th gear corner, you don't suddenly take it in 6th because you're taking a risk. It's just that extra, I don't know, is it 1%, 2%? I don't know what it is, but it's just having that belief that you can do it and pulling it all together. You've got to get, on a stage like that, you've got to get absolutely everything perfect. and you almost by the end of it, sometimes it doesn't feel that great. You know, you're in the zone, you're that much in the zone that you don't actually realise you are actually pulling away. You can get to the end of a stage sometimes and think, oh, man, it was good. There was no mistakes, but I'm not sure it was quite enough. And that's generally the ones that are better than others. So you've got it. It's just. I guess it's down to the belief that you can actually just stretch that little bit more.
I think that's what makes top drivers the top drivers, isn't it? Really.
And
pull that out of the bag.
Yeah, no, as I mean, there's the well, I was actually one of the guys that was out in the motocross track with today. He's actually from the UK. He's out here. He's an SAS, and he's out here training the Australian guys. And I was chatting to him about what they're doing out here in the kill house, you know. And he says when he's training the kill house, they don't go in crazy shooting everywhere. It's all very, very calm. He says you've always got to be in that position where you don't need to think about it, and that's the same in a rally car. If you're having to think about trying to go quick, you're not going to do it. You've got to be able to get to a point where it becomes natural, and you've got that. I guess you're driving 100%, but you've still got 10% of your brain that can take in all the other stuff around about you. You know, you can feel the tires going off, or the conditions slightly changing, or you've got extra brain power to work in that while you're still doing the job that other people struggle to do. So it's just basically, people say to you, your heart rate must go through the roof. My heart rate would be, I don't know, 110 beats a minute. It's worse than a rally car. But yeah, if you go out cycling, it can be 150. You've got to be in that zone where you can do it without really thinking about it.
What's the best rally car you've been in? What would you take and put in your garage?
I mean, the one car that I drove that was definitely equal to everything else that was out there at the time was the Subaru in '98 and Rally GB. That was a winning car. That was a proven winner, and it was an awesome thing to drive. You know, the Hyundai and then the Mitsubishi would have been quicker than that car, but in its day, that car was as quick as anything. So driving that would be, if you're going to go back and do an event in the same time as with everybody else, then I would choose that Subaru.
So what would you say was the worst? And please say the Hyundai.
No, I reckon the worst car I ever drove was actually here in Australia, and it was a Honda Civic run by a Taiwanese drug dealer.
Allegedly.
Shoot up big time.
I found out when I came out here that's what he was. He owned the team, and then I kind of took it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But then I saw one of the mechanics 2 years later on an event, and I asked him how his old boss was doing. He says he got found with a bullet in the back of the head about 2 months after Australia and Taiwan. So I guess he probably was a drug dealer.
So, does anybody have any questions?
Earlier on, Alister, you said that you can't beat the sound of a BDA coming through the forest, but yet you don't choose that to be your to be the one rally car you would have. Why is that?
For me, I mean, I only drove rear wheel drive. I think before I started doing the odd event with the Escort, I'd only ever done, I think I did the Trossachs twice with a Sierra, and that was my dad said, if you can win the championship in the Nova before the last round, then you can drive one of the Sierras. So I did that twice. I'd only ever driven rear wheel drive then. Then when I kind of stopped and built the Escort and drove the Escort, but that time for me that was just all about fun, you know. Whereas the Subaru was when you were fighting in the World Championship, and it was a job, but you were in the best, quickest car of the time and fighting against the best driver. So for me, that the feeling of doing that, jumping an Escort is great fun, sounds great, love it, but for the actual competitive side of it, it's the Subaru.
Yeah.
You miss it, Alister. The whole razzmatazz, the WRC.
No, you do. You spend. I mean, I'd have loved to done more in the WRC, but it didn't happen. But I left the steelworks in '92, and I've probably never really had a proper job. I've got my own business now, and I do that, but I haven't actually worked for anybody, and I spent 20 years being paid for doing something that I would have done as a hobby. You know, I paid to do it myself in the Nova. So to actually get to the point where you're professional and to do that for 20 years, there's not that many sports that you can have that length of a career. So you do that, for sure you miss it. It takes you a long time to, I guess, to get over it and realise that you're not going to do it anymore. But you know, life goes on. I still enjoy my life at the moment. But yeah, for sure, you miss that driving side.
It must be great to jump in a rally car and relax after you're talking about the pressures and the Subaru and the full on. But to just turn up at an event in an Escort or something, it must feel good.
Oh no, it feels good, but the problem is I'm still competitive, so it's still great fun. But when you get there, no matter how much you say you're just going to go and have fun, you know, you're guaranteed at the end of the first stage, you're looking at the times and you're working out how far behind and what you need to do to get that time back. So it's great fun, but it's always when the helmet goes on and at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 go, your mentality changes a bit. It goes back to what you used to be, for sure.
How do you find the motocross? Do you just do that as a kind of hobby thing just to keep you fit? And what kind of bikes are you using on that?
And for me, as I say, we used bikes right through my career, I'm mainly more do enduro now here. Right. The problem with the enduro is kind of April through to October in the winter. So the only place you can really ride here in the summer is on the motocross track. So for me, this is the first year.
Do you do competitions on the motocross or no?
No. I just go on practice days and go with some mates and stuff. So it's not. You get back to that competitive bit again. Whereas if I went to a race, I would be competitive and I'd probably hurt myself. Right. And I don't. I used to bounce. Now I just brake. So.
I've got one of my guys here's big into his motocross, and he's going to ask me what type of bikes you're riding. So.
I'm actually at the moment I use the enduro bikes. There used to be KTM's, but then I had a Sherco a few years ago. Now I've got a Beta, so I've got 350 Beta 4-stroke.
A 350. I've no idea what that is. 2 wheels is not my thing.
So see, looking back, Alister, I mean, was one of the best times when you're building Novas to beat like say Robbie Head and the Pals thing, compared to going into the professional side of things. It must have been great back in those days, just all going into the garage and building a wee Nova.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. That was one thing you built. You worked in your own car, and then you went and rallied it. So when it went wrong, you knew what you were doing to repair it and so on, or you knew what it was going to take to fix it when you went off into the trees. So that for me, that was basically doing your apprenticeship. You know, building the cars, learning about them, and that helped you later on when you were a professional driver and that you understood the mechanical side of the car.
So did you have a structure in place at the time, or were you just trying to do as many rallies as you could, or were you trying to get to the top?
Nah, it was more just do what you could afford to do. So, you know, the first year was the Scottish Championship. Then, as you managed to get some sponsors on board, you could go and do some British rounds, and then that was the way it just went. So it was more, you would rally every weekend if you could do it, but you know the budget wasn't there, so it was just a matter of doing what you could afford to do and doing the correct events. You know, there was no point in just doing whatever 6 events of anywhere. It was better doing, you know, 2 or 3 good events, like go and do the Scottish Rally, the International, or do an event where you, at that point, where you might get noticed by the Peugeot team or the Ford team, whatever. So you planned your events, but it was down to budget.
What was your favourite event in Scotland, apart from the Scottish? The McRae.
Probably the McRae was always good, but I think the up in that area where the McRae's, say the Drummond Hill and Craigvenny and all these, they're all great stages. So anywhere in that, any of these stages in that area were great. Even if you start going down towards the borders as well, down that way, they're all good stages there. Very much, a lot of them very similar to what you get in Wales. So.
What about the BRC? What was your favourite round? Is it just the Scottish or the Manx or what?
Wales, I think probably Wales. The Welsh had a real good track record there. Still, the Scottish was great, but for some reason, I went to Wales and always had confidence that I'll be fighting at the front. And it's on your home event, the Scottish, you had that same feeling, but to do that elsewhere was always good.
Are you optimistic the challenge event at Knockhill in October will still happen? And if so, are you or Max needing a co-driver?
I'm just hoping we can get across to. I'm hoping it runs. Obviously, we want it to run, and then it's at the moment we pretty much they've only just opened up that we can travel to other states in Australia. We've been stuck in WA. When they'll open the international borders, I don't know, but I'm hoping with the vaccine rolling out, it arrives here. I think the first doses arrive today, and they start putting that out next week. So hopefully, by mid-year, there might be a chance of getting back. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So anyway, well, that's everybody. Just like to say thank you on behalf of Glenoffice, Alister, for joining us. I'm sure you've got to go away and throw some tucker on a Barbie or something like that, have you?
No, it's 9 o'clock at night here. It's all exciting stuff. I'm going for a cup of tea and watch TV before bed.
Coronation Street. Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Alister.
Thanks,
We
Alan.
look forward
thank
to
you.
seeing you over on these shores sometime soon. Okay.
Hopefully.
Take care,
Right.
pal.
Cheers.
Bye.